Vanessa, it's so good to see you. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. I am so stoked about our conversation.
Ivy, I'm so honored to be here. This is actually, I think, my first podcast that I'm a guest on.
Wait, what?
Yes.
How's that possible with all your
I
jokes and all your goodness? This is the first one. No.
I think so. I have a bunch of people on my podcast. I have like 50 something episodes, but I've never been a guest on someone. So this is very exciting for me.
Oh, girl, we're about to have some fun. Those who listen to this podcast, they know that I think we're gonna have a really good conversation. Vanessa, we always start the conversation on the podcast with your story. It's important for people to know who you are. You can go as deep as you'd like, but tell us what's your story and what led you to do what you do today.
I'm half Colombian, I'm half white, and that is something that is just a part of my everyday life. It's just a part of me. I think that's really important and worth noting. And experiencing that and seeing how my mom navigated the world as a Colombian immigrant and a brown person, right? And then me growing up, my last name is Schwippert. I look like this. I was born here. My experience was so different. And I noticed it as a small child, and I grew up with that knowledge that when it was time to choose a career, I went into special education just to be part of the advocacy and part of the positive change for marginalized people in that way. So I was a teacher for a few years in Paterson, Jersey City, and Newark. And I was a special education teacher, and it was really difficult for my mental health to be a special education teacher because a lot of what the education system does is for money. It's to prove to the state how well they're doing or how bad they're doing, and that's why they need more funds. So it just depends on what their goal is, right? And as a teacher, I wanted my students to be happy and fulfilled, and I wanted to give them a really good environment so that they could learn and grow up to be the most fulfilled adults in society. And it really felt like I couldn't provide that for them. For example, it's kind of seems jargony when I say that, but this is a really good example that'll show you what I mean. We were learning how it was a science class. I was a science teacher for a couple years, and we were learning how animals communicate. And instead of giving them a five-page story to read and then 10 questions to answer, I was like, why don't we just turn into little animals, right? You be a lemur, you be a cheetah, and let's pretend there's danger, and let's pretend like you're trying to warn your friends, and we can go outside and play this game. And then at the end, we can do a group discussion about how it's so hard for these animals to communicate when they don't have language, right?
Mhm.
We went outside, we played the game, and we got in trouble. We got in trouble for taking the kids outside and playing a game. They told us that they had to be inside and reading and writing only. And I just thought that was really inappropriate. Obviously, students need to be reading. Reading comprehension is super important. They need to be able to articulate their thoughts and comprehension. But I think there's value with once a week, twice a week, learning through play, at least, right? If not all the time, at least a few times. So that's just one example that it was like I was trying to do the best environment for my students, and it didn't work out. So I had to leave the education field. My boyfriend actually made me, and I'm not someone to be forced to do anything. No one can tell me what to do. Yo hago lo que me da la gana all the time. But my boyfriend was like, you need to leave teaching because I'm concerned for you, your health, your mental health, your future. That's what got me into podcasting. I wanted to talk about all of these things that I've been talking about the first few minutes of your podcast, right? I wanted to talk about it unfiltered without worrying about what my job was going to say or school or any of that stuff. So I got into podcasting in hopes to like shed light on these things and also be a safe space for people who are aware of these things. And, it can be isolating when you're aware of these things. And so I wanted to be a safe space and share my knowledge. And then through that, I started the Latina Writing Comunidad, and that is really what has just taken off and what I've been really focusing on lately is the Latina Writing Comunidad. Just being a safe space for progressive Latinas who feel isolated, disrupting the status quo all the time. They are viewed as problematic at family functions, at work, and so I try to make a group where it's like, let's learn let's regulate our nervous system. Let's learn about our finances because a lot of us are entrepreneurs and in our lane trying to make a difference. That's what the past like year and a half of my life has been like, the podcast and the Latina Writing Comunidad.
I'm curious, why leave the education field altogether? Or why not stay to change the system, so to speak?
It often felt like I was the only person in a room of like 50 something people. And it can be hard when you are talking to other marginalized people about not criminalizing our
Mhm.
community and they disagree. And they're in a position of power, let's say a principal, and they're telling staff to call the cops if a parent is 1 minute late to pick up their student, their child, right? And I'm standing up every single time these things are happening. I'm raising my hand, I'm using my voice, I'm sending emails, I'm talking to parents, I'm changing. The school tells me to do something and I'm telling everyone, no, I'm not doing that. It's exhausting, right?
Yeah.
It's draining. Everyone hated me, especially on the political spectrum, right? If I'm all the way on the left, there's a lot of people on the right who hear what I'm saying and completely disagree. And so they hate you. And it's hard to walk into a room where people like don't want to, completely disrespect you, don't care what you have to say. It doesn't matter. You're crazy. You're wrong. And that was really hard. And so I was like, oh, let's just switch schools. It's the school. It wasn't the school, right? And then I switched again. Okay, like now I did research and I saw that this school is better and this school is like anti-racist. They're familiar of the systemic issues and they're working to change it. But they still are working in the constraints of being underfunded every year, losing money for, the things that the money is being reallocated to. So it wasn't sustainable to stay. But with that being said, I am still really connected to my teacher like population. A lot of teachers follow me. I'm friends with a lot of teachers, and I'm still able to positively impact that environment and be my mental health can still be in a good place where I can do that. If I stayed teaching, I don't think I would be able to have a good mental health standing and be able to participate in that way, you know?
Yes. And I asked the question because I think for many people, they could be in a very emotionally draining and exhausting and a mentally taxing job that they went into with such pure and good intentions. And then you get there and you're like, wait, this is not healthy for me, actually. And I want to give and I want to uplift my community, but this is at my expense now. This is really difficult. So, how do I do it a little differently? And maybe it does mean completely leaving and doing it in a different way, which it seems like you're doing, which I love. And then this question of how can I turn my passion into something else, which then you have this podcast and you have the Latina Writing Comunidad, which is amazing. Talk more about the podcast because for those who don't know, Vanessa and I met at a virtual Lean in Latinas event and meeting. And she was talking about the Chick Lit podcast, which focuses on mostly to empower women, how to prioritize yourself, and decenter men. And let me tell you, when she said decenter men, I was like, oh, I need to know more about that. Because culturally, you know this, especially American culture, yeah, but especially Latino culture. That idea, that phrase, decenter men, it seems to go directly counter to how we're raised, Vanessa. So tell me more about the podcast. Tell me more about why that focus.
So that focus, because I feel like when I was centering men, I was the most emotionally unwell, insecure person that I've ever been, being in my 20s. I literally lived my life where it's like, okay, fine, my mom wants me to go to school. I'm going to go to school just so that she's not mad at me. Honestly, that's the only reason why I got a degree because I'm like, okay, I don't want my mom to hate me. Cool. Did that. Amazing. Now it's like, okay, now I need to find a boyfriend. I need to find a good guy to get married to and have kids with because that's the next step, right? And when you have that mindset, it's almost like you're going to take any guy that's nice to you, doesn't physically harm you, isn't cheating on you, and has a 9 to 5. So the bar is so low when you're centering these men, whereas you focus on yourself and what you want, then you're able to find a man that matches that. And so maybe it's still centering men a little bit, but I'm not a man hater. I have a boyfriend of 6 years. I love him. He's a really great guy. I'm really not. So that's not the point of this. It's just a matter of shifting the focus, and maybe the goal isn't like finding a man. The goal is deciding, consciously deciding the life that you want and how you want to live it. And then you'll find a partner like, oh, you're going to fit this, right? So for example, me, I'm in entrepreneurship now, right? My boyfriend is also an entrepreneur. So it's like that matches. But if you're not an entrepreneur and you're dating someone that's not an entrepreneur, maybe it'll work, but it's two different worlds and it'll cause friction. It's very difficult, like stuff like that. That's why I try to center myself because yes, I have my boyfriend, we're in a long-term relationship, we're safe and secure, but if it's not going to match, I'm not going to stop doing, let's say, the podcast just for my boyfriend. I'm not going to stop doing the Latina Writing Comunidad just for my boyfriend. I'm not going to stay being a teacher just for my boyfriend. No, I need to make sure that all of my decisions are because I want them to be that way. I'm deciding that for myself. And then if the men come and they stay and they're great and they deserve it, awesome. And if they don't, on to the next. You're a lot more happier and secure and fulfilled if that's the case. And more successful, I think. If you're doing things that are more aligned with you, you just feel better and you can get better and do better things.
How did you come to that realization? Like, how did you come to that philosophy?
Honestly, my mom is very much like me. Me and my mom are the same person. She has a really strong personality and she's going to tell you what she thinks. And if you don't agree with her, she doesn't care. Like, all right, moving on. My mom has been such a strong presence in my life. She definitely tried to instill the centering men in me. Even to this day, if I go out and I leave my boyfriend at home, my mom's like, what is he gonna do? He's a grown man. What do you mean? He will figure it out. He can call an Uber, he can order food. I don't care. Go to sleep. I just don't care. I'm living my life. He's 37 years old. Let that man do his
He
thing,
is
right?
a grown man.
I just don't care. He can do with his day what he wants. It might be like in spite of my mom being like, "Oh, be nice to him. You don't want him to break up with you. We have to make sure you feed him. Don't leave him alone." She tried so hard to stuff it in me that I was like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, lady. I'm not doing that. It's 2025. I don't need a man to be successful, mostly because I have my mom. Like you, you provide that safety, girl. I do not need men." I think it might be because of that.
I'm asking because I coach a lot of women in their 30s and their 40s.
Hmm.
And one of their challenges tends to be, how do I actually live how I want? How do I actually prioritize myself when I've been trained and conditioned and programmed to not do that and to put others ahead of myself and to work so hard and so much that I sacrifice myself? And then I turn
Yeah,
around 5, 10 years later and I'm like, wait, what am I doing this for? And then there's like an identity crisis in many ways, right? Who am I? What am I doing? What am I doing this for? So that's why I'm asking, because you have figured this out and you're sharing this message that's so powerful, because it takes so many people so a lot longer sometimes to really say, hey, this is how I want to live and I'm going to do it.
for sure. And there are two things that were pivotal moments for me, and they actually happened at the same exact time, but I do think they're two different things that made me come to that realization. The first one was turning 31, because
Mm.
when I turned 30, I was like, I'm not married. I don't have kids, and I had just left teaching, so I didn't have a career. I spent 100K to be a teacher, and I abandoned the profession. So I was like, my life is over. I'm a loser. And no one else was saying that. You know, some people will be like, oh, I'm doing it for the haters. I don't have any haters. And if I have a hater, they're very quiet. They don't say anything. Because I don't have any negativity in my life, literally ever. So that might be another factor, right? Because some people do have that negativity. But turning 31 and realizing, wait, I left teaching. I have a really supportive mom that loves me to death and like doesn't hate me for leaving teaching. I don't have any haters at all. My boyfriend didn't leave me for making this switch and changing. And I'm like, oh, my life didn't end just because I'm 30. and childless and not married. So I was like, okay, that's something special. But another thing that I think is very special that not a lot of people are able to experience was that I actually went on a 7 month sabbatical after I left teaching. It wasn't like on purpose, honestly. Like I was looking for a job. I wasn't able to find a job. During that 7 months, I was actively looking for a job, but I also went to therapy. I had two separate therapists doing two different types of therapies to kind of regulate my nervous system and process everything and make sure that I didn't unalive myself because that was a thought or a desire on the table. I wasn't making any plans, but like it was
Mm,
there. It was an option. And I was like, is that something that we're going to do? And that was very scary, right? So having those 7 months to have the two therapists support my mental health, I went on not a fitness journey because that can sound like it really wasn't to lose weight. It was really just to regulate my nervous system. What do I like to do? Is it yoga? Is it Orange Theory? Is it walks? Is it lifting? Is it running? What is it? And I really took the time to try a lot of things to see what I enjoy. And the answer is lifting. I really like in January lifting 10 pounds and then in December lifting 50 pounds. I enjoy being strong and growing and seeing that progression. I think that's a really important lesson for women to learn. You have to start somewhere. You're going to be bad. Your form is bad. You're going to be weak. And then by showing up every day, 5 days a week, 4 days a week, over time, you're going to progress and you're going to lift that heavy, whatever it is. You're going to hit your PR, your personal record. So that I think the 7 month sabbatical was very transformative in that way. And it's because of my mom. She allowed us to stay in my childhood home. I didn't have to pay rent. There was no rush to find a job. I didn't have to rush and get a job that I hated, that wasn't aligned with me. I was able to really pursue and take my time and find something that worked for me. So I don't want people to feel bad, like, oh, I can't prioritize myself. It's hard. Like, I need to acknowledge that it's very hard and it's not accessible, but we can do hard things. If my mom came to this country at 19 years old. She didn't speak English. She was undocumented, like all of those things. If she can come and raise two children, buy a home, create a retirement plan, like if she can do that in the 80s, I can do whatever I want. I
yeah.
don't care how hard it is. I can do whatever I want because I'm in the United States. I'm born and raised here. I have papers. Like, I'm good. That's like a really important lesson too.
Part of it is I'm hearing so many things. One is the sabbatical, that 7 month sabbatical. It sounds like it was recovery as well. There was recovery, it was experimentation, it was understanding how do I move forward in my life more holistically? And then how do I start to experiment with things to make myself feel better, meaning holistically better, physically, mentally, emotionally? Like you understood that it's about mind, body, spirit. It's not just about the mind or the emotion or the physical. And I love that you talked about two different therapists and that you mentioned regulating your nervous system. Can you talk more about the importance of regulating your nervous system and where you first heard that?
Where I first heard it, I don't know because I'm very active on the internet and like I've always been active on the internet ever since I was like 12. Like I had MySpace, I had AIM. I've always just
Oh
been
my
an
God,
internet
MySpace, girl, you're taking
like
AOL Instant Messenger. Oh my God.
yes, like that's what I'm saying. I think I was younger than 12 years old because I remember my mom would kick me off of the computer because she needed to go on the phone and use the card to call Columbia. So she was like, get off the computer because they're connected to the phone and I have to use this little card and click all the and fill the prepaid card. So it was like, I remember that. I've always been on the internet. So I say that to say that I don't know, but it was probably the internet where I heard the nervous system regulation. I think it's important because for me, I was always in fight mode. I never was secure and never felt safe. If ever as an adult, I don't think I ever felt that way. And I think it was because I was in an education system where I'm in a room of 50 people talking about welfare queens. And that's racist, right? And if you feel that way about these parents, you're saying that about my mom. You're saying that if you're mad that these parents are not helping their kids with their homework, You're judging my mom for not helping me with my homework when she didn't even speak English. She didn't go to school in the United States. She was working 12-hour shifts at a factory, and you're going to be mad at my mom. I took it extremely personally, and I think it's hard not to, and I don't want to be mad at myself for doing that because it is terrible, those things that happened, but I let it affect me way too much because my nervous system was always like ready to fight. And it's because I was in spaces that were not for me. They were not welcoming for Latinas. They were not welcoming for brown people. Like, I know I'm not brown, but like my mom is brown. So it's like, if you hate brown people, girl, you have a problem with me too. So it's that nervous system regulation. And like with therapy, I had two different therapies. I had cognitive behavioral therapy, and then I also had narrative therapy. And it's just the approach that they take and the way that they do therapy that it's four different things. I really liked having both at the same time because you oftentimes you go to therapy and you're like, I don't know what I'm going to talk about. There's always something. Just a mindset shift, learning things about psychology and the human brain and how that pertains to you. Not so much like, oh, my mom is the worst. Like, no, that's not what therapy is. It's about learning and applying things to you and using science and using those frameworks to heal your mind and be able to process and behave in a way that you want. That's why, like before, when you were giving me a disclaimer, like, oh, if you want to edit something, let me know. It's like I feel like now my nervous system is so regulated that I'm able to control the words that come out of my mouth. That's not something that I had in my 20s. Whatever I thought is what came out. Whatever I felt was fact, and you were wrong, and I was gonna say it, and we were gonna fight about it. Like that was my process in my 20s. And while my heart and my intentions were good, and I have a lot of friends and family that knew me in my 20s and they still love me, I'm 33, it's all good, it's fine. It's just a really negative way to exist. And I didn't want to exist that way anymore. So all of the intentions, all of the beliefs, all of the values are still there. I just had to shift it, and I learned to hear what someone is saying, process it in real time, and be conscious of the words that are coming out of my mouth.
Yeah, you learned how to give yourself space between
Yeah.
you receiving and what then you would share and what your response would be. That's really powerful. And it's something so many people will ask me, how do I become calmer and be less reactive? They also have trouble with what you were able to do over time, which is take how you felt, meaning, hey, I don't want to live like this anymore, and actually put that into action and do something about it. You had two different therapists, you were on this journey. A lot of people, though, stay stuck right where you were before you had that journey. You stay stuck right there. So I'm curious, like, even from your conversations with different people in your life and in the different communities you're in, I'm curious what you feel like is the biggest challenge people face and actually taking action to change the way that they're living. Because you were able to do that, right? But there's some people who just they don't move, they stay stuck. What have you seen to be like the biggest challenges for people who stay stuck, and why do they stay stuck?
A lot of people don't have the privilege or the opportunity that I had, which was to leave my job. A lot of people have a mortgage to pay. They're the breadwinner for their family. They have children. They have cars that are going to get repoed next month if they don't make the payment. So that financial instability that really stops people. That's why I always talk about the Latina pay gap. I always talk about paying people fairly. I always try to talk about how capitalism is this big, scary, bad word. And we have to be conscious of the humanity in people and make sure we're paying people well so that they can be aligned. Even like health insurance, right? Health insurance being tied to your job, I completely disagree with because there are a lot of people who only have jobs because of health insurance. And as an employer, that's a bad reason to have someone working for you, right? They're not going to show up, they're not going to perform well, they don't care. They're only showing up because of health insurance. They're only showing up because they need to pay for daycare. Like they need to go to work to pay for daycare because their kids at home because they're at work and they can't watch their kids. So it's this sick little cycle, right? That is the part that stops people from moving. It's not a conscious decision. It's just inaccessible to leave your job, especially now, right? The economy is different, right? I don't want to fear monger. It's just the economy is different. Everything has shifted. And so it's hard for people to just be like, oh, I'm going to quit my job and let's see what the next 6 months are like. Like, I didn't have kids. I didn't have a mortgage. I was a teacher. I was always poor. So I was like, if I'm going to be poor for the rest of my life as a teacher, might as well be poor being a podcaster. Might as well be poor doing this Latina writing
Feeling
comunidad.
fulfilled. Feeling more fulfilled. Yes.
I live in Jersey. I'll get health insurance through the state. I'm cool. I didn't have that financial restriction. And again, like my mom, like letting me live here, like that reduces my cost of living significantly. So to me, that's what does it.
When you share your story, I think of so many women who they think that I can't leave my job, so I'm just going to do what I'm doing. And I always say, well, what can you do within the constraints? Within your constraints, let's call them constraints. They may call them something different, but what can you do? So you can leave your job for financial reasons, right? But what can you do to start taking care of yourself? What can you do to start taking care of your mental health? What can you do to start creating even one boundary to give you a little bit more space to start feeling like yourself? Or how about what can you do when you do have time and you're not going to scroll on social media at night and doom scroll? Could you do some self exploration and reconnect with you and reignite that part of you that might have been dulled in the past few years or the past 10 for so many? I always think there's something that we can do, but most people say, I just want to leave my job. This is killing me. Instead of looking at it like, yeah, that's one option. But for most people, Vanessa, it isn't an option. They feel like it's not for those financial reasons. I like that you highlight that. Let's switch gears and talk about the Latina Writing Comunidad because I love that you've done this. I'm a writer. I have many friends who are Latino who are writers. And it's funny because once you start putting yourself out there in the community, you start seeing how many of you are out there. And it's really empowering and inspiring to be in that space and in that energy. Tell me more about the comunidad and what you're up to, what the women are up to in the community, and just give us all the details.
I started this group just because I wanted to write a book about my mom's life coming to the US. I love her story, and I think that there was a lot of like pain and struggle and a lot of happiness and fulfillment from my mom's journey. And I wanted to share that complexity because I know it's super common and I know that we all know that about our families. It's just not represented in media, especially me being Colombian, right? The only thing we know about Colombia is that we sell Coke, right? That's the only thing people know us as. So I'm like, no, I need to talk about my mom, who was a factory worker. She supported her family, single mom, bought her house by herself without a man. That's also probably where I got the decentering the thing from. She's never
Love
needed a
it.
man to
Love
do
it.
any of it. She built her retirement plan because she never wanted to be a financial burden on me and my sister, which is also something that's a little special about her, right? Like I think it's over 70% of Latinos financially support their families through retirement. And my mom was like, not me. Like you put me in a home and I'm not going to disrupt you and your family and your life. Like she never wants to be a burden to us. So I just really wanted to share her experience and then obviously maybe write a book about me being half white, half Colombian. I think that's very common and special and needs to be talked about as well. I realized that there were a lot of writers out there that wanted to write a book, but they didn't know what to do. So I was like, let's just all do a little support group where we all encourage each other to write. And if we have a goal or deadlines, or maybe you know a publisher and you know an editor, like let's just all come together and help each other out. And then we turned it into workshops. And so now we provide workshops, and it's a really wide range of workshops. Our first one was a hypnosis session to get over,
That's
yeah,
really cool. Yes.
yeah.
Go ahead. Keep going. I
With
love
Ruby provided a hypnosis session to get us over writer's block. Hadi has been a speaker. I had a tax expert join and provide information on how to do your taxes and best practices because you were there, right? Because we're all entrepreneurs, new entrepreneurs, and we need to be in compliance because everyone is afraid of the IRS, right?
I don't want to
So
get any, I don't want any notifications on the IRS, like ever. I don't want
I don't
any.
want the government to, I don't want to be on the government's radar ever. Like, The less you know about me, the better, right? But that's funny because I'm always on the internet. If they pull up my file, they know everything about me. So it's just a wide range of workshops, and we've had like nervous system regulation as well. We have a Latina lawyer joining us too, and all of it is just centering Latinas who are disrupting their own industries. Like disrupting the racism and the negative stereotypes and the bad practices and just trying to do their best to positively impact the world because it can be so isolating when we're going into spaces where we're not welcomed, right? That imposter syndrome where you feel like you don't belong. And I don't want that. That's not my group at all. It's for Latinas. And if you're not a Latina, let's say you're white or you're black or you're Asian, you can come, but it's centering Latinidad. It's centering the Latina experience. And you need to know that. Like the group is for Latinas to be a safe space for us to learn, to heal, to connect, to build. Like there are a few people that have become real life friends because of the Latina Writing Comunidad. They do podcast episodes together. There's a lot that goes on. It's a networking thing. I feel like every day I'm like, how can I just like center the Latina community? And it's grown into now I'm doing in-person events too. And the in-person events are very similar. I just had my first one actually back in January. There are a lot of places where we don't feel like we belong, but we belong here. And we are going to have fun together and enjoy this beautiful afternoon together. And I think that's really important so that we're energized to keep on participating in other spaces.
With communities like that, and meaning a curated space where you're creating this experience and it's focused on Latinidad. I always say to people that could be self-care too, where you feel energized by something and you feel deeply connected with someone else, and it's an unsaid, unspoken kind of connection too. Like when you're Latina, you have a common experience right there. Like all of us have the Latina mom story. All of us have the Latina tia story. We all have that, and we have language. I find it so fascinating. You can go to multiple countries and speak Spanish. Yes, our cultures are diverse, but language is so powerful. And there are so many times where I'm thinking of something and I can only think of the Spanish word for it. I'm like, no, that doesn't translate well to English. Like it's not as powerful. It's not as like oomph. It doesn't have that oomph to it. But having a community where there is such a common ground can be so energizing and fulfilling to people that I think people sleep on it. I think people restrict themselves to like, I have this job, I have my colleagues, and I may not feel like I belong included, or I have to code switch, or I have to be someone else, or I'm not fully expressed. But they sleep on communities like this where they can join and access that part of themselves that they've, in some ways, I will say this, in some ways, have suppressed or feel like they've had to. And so I find these communities so powerful. So even Lean Latinas and all these different communities. You know, sometimes, Vanessa, when you're about to go into one of those events and you're like, oh man, maybe I just want to go take a nap. And then you're like, no, 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 I'm going to show up because I know every time I show up, something amazing happens. And every time it does. So I love that you've created this community and I love how you're centering it. I'm sure it's having a bigger impact than you probably can even imagine.
I actually had to start taking notes on the amount of women that hit me up and say, I'm depressed this week and I'm only feeling good because of the Latina Writing Comunidad or your podcast. And it's like, yeah, I'm
Mhm.
not making a dime off of this, and that's fine. I'm at a place in my life where that's okay, right? I'm okay with that. But I positively impacted like one person, and now I have a list of I think it's like 15 people. What? That is so big. Like I'm thinking like they would be sad, and then I switched it, right? And if I didn't switch it in that moment, they were going to spend more time being sad, more time feeling isolated. I don't want that. Like, so I feel really proud that I'm doing and I'm just really excited to see how it continues to grow and evolve and take shape because, like I've said, one of the goals is I don't want to charge the women like let's say $500 a month to be part of this group. I don't want to do that. What I want to do is I want to charge 10,000 women $10.
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Like I want to make it accessible. I want it to be in several cities so that everyone can have this community, right? And that's another reason why I'm okay with not making money now because that's not the point. The point is that I need to be creating this community and I need everyone to be coming together and feeling safe and fulfilled so that they can go back to their work or go into their homes or go into their family or even with strangers and positively interact with strangers or anyone that they're interacting with. So that's really the goal here.
Vanessa, let me ask you, and I didn't give you this question in advance. Do you feel like you have a life purpose that you're living out with these different things you're doing?
I don't know if it's a life purpose, but I know that this is what I'm good at. This is how I am. My friends who have known me for 10 plus years, they're like, yeah, this makes sense. You talk to everybody. I can't go anywhere without talking to people. I'm a social butterfly. I connect with people. It doesn't matter. I'm oversharing with people. This is just who I am. Oh, you have a podcast where you tell everyone every detail about your life? Yeah, that makes sense. Oh, you're having parties for Latinas? Uh-huh. Yeah, it checks all makes sense. So why don't I just like spend my time doing the thing that I'm naturally gonna do anyways, and hopefully one day turn it into a business. But right now it's just about building the community, building the connections, learning from people. Like I feel like the person that I was last year is a completely different person because the podcast was different. Literally, it was very different last year. The group was very different. It was just girls getting together to chat. Now, a year later, so I'm like, what's 2026 going to be like? What is going to happen in 2025? It's just going to grow and change and shift. And I'm excited to figure it out and go along for the ride. I'm very proud of myself for even feeling that way because I feel like in my 20s, any shift was earth-shattering. I
Yes.
wouldn't have been able to deal with a change in my
Yes.
20s. But now I'm like, oh, we're doing workshops? Let's do it. Oh, you want me to do a host the Lean in New York call in March? Okay, let's do it. Anything that's coming, I'm like, we got it. That's a really special and a change and a shift I've seen in myself, and I'm just like going along with it, right? It's funny to go from being like, oh, I'm depressed and I hate my life to now being like, huh, what's gonna come tomorrow? What's tomorrow gonna bring,
And
you
that's a
know?
no, but when you tell your story, I'm like, I can see that. I can
Yeah.
see the progression. And it wasn't overnight. You just dropped so many gems, and I'm going to highlight some for people if they didn't catch them. The first one is the need to be adaptable and having a growth mindset. You have both of those things. The second is something you said, which I love this response, where I was like, is it your life purpose? And you said, I know I'm good at this. And things come easy to you because they are innate to you and they're part of your true nature. And when we go against our true nature and our truth, that's when we have the tension and the friction and the resistance. That's why it doesn't feel good, but it feels good to you and it feels fulfilling because there is an ease to it because it's who you are. And so many people go against that and try to morph into something else. That's why it feels so shitty because they're not easing into and going with the flow of their true nature. And you're doing that. I really want to double click on it because there is an opportunity for people listening to tap back into what is their true nature. What do I like doing? What do I, not what I have to do, not what are my responsibilities, not my obligations. What do I like to do? What brings me joy? What brings me a sense of happiness, even if it's temporary? What is that? How do I tap into that? Vanessa, I think you're a great example of that. Like, I'm going to do more of what I flow into. And it's not haphazard, it's actually very intentional. You wanting to grow the community, you're thinking
Yeah.
about, okay, let's do workshops. This will serve the community. That's all intentional.
It's me being open
Yes.
because the
Yes.
reason why we're doing workshops is literally because Ruby was like, hey, can I host the next session? Because I do hypnosis and I can
Yes.
get us through it. And I could have said, oh no, sorry, this is like a support group. We don't do workshops. But I was like, who am I? Ruby's part of the group. She wants to host a workshop. I don't have to pay her and she's going to do a workshop. Sure. You want to invite your network? I'm going to get 10, 15 people. Sure, come join. And then Hadi was like, I want to do one. And then the third person, and then the fourth. And then now I'm booked through June of 2025. And I actually just booked someone for September because I take a summer break. I'm going along with it and pivoting along with it. I think pivoting is important too because it's scary. I could have been like I said, I could have said, no, sorry, this is a support group. I have a support group and I'm going to do a support group. I could have stayed on that lane. But then if someone's taking you on this journey, let's explore it. Let's see what happens. And people have had a really positive response. If it would have been a negative response, let's say people don't come, I track attendance, so I pay attention to see what does well and what doesn't. So it's like paying attention to those things and doing what the community wants because I'm servicing the community. I also think that when we're talking about what fulfills us, this is fulfilling to me. I enjoy doing these things. My boyfriend is very analytical. He's a business person, he's an entrepreneur. He went to Wharton Business School. He's one of a few Latinos in the United States that's raised over $20 million in venture capitalist funds. So he's a business person. And so he's like, why don't you just do this on Excel? Why don't you just run these numbers? And I'm like, how about you run a group? You start a group with centering your people, whatever your demographic is, choose one, right? Whatever your labels are, choose one, and you start a group and gather people that are excited. You do that. And he's like, oh, I could never. Yeah, I could never do an Excel sheet. I don't want to do that, you know? So it's like leaning into what works and also finding people who complement that as well. Because he has his company and he has a co-founder who also complements him really well. And that's why his company does well. For me in the LWC, the Latina Writing Comunidad, it's like, I'm good at this. And now I'm telling my boyfriend, you need to help me, at least part-time, at
Yeah.
least 5 hours a week. You need to do these things that you're telling me to do that feels like dental work to
Yeah.
me. You need to do it. And I'll literally give you a percentage of the company. And then when we make money in 2026, 2027, you're good. Like, we'll figure that out later. But whatever you want me to do, can you do it? Because I don't want to. So it's finding the people that will fill in your gaps. I think that is really important too. And you should be finding that in a partner too. You can't just be accepting these men just because they have a job and just because they're not cheating on you. Find the people that are complimenting you well and elevating your life and filling in your gaps. I have that in close friends too. It doesn't have to be your significant other. It could be your best friend, your family, anything. Whatever it is that you're doing, be open to changes and find people that complement it, like a yin and yang type thing.
Yes. And Vanessa, you're also an example of this, but be the person who you are and who you want to become. And because you can't want all these things, but you're not living that too. You have to be living in integrity with
Yeah.
who you want to be and your values as well. We have to.
Definitely the workshops. I love the LWC. I love expanding the network. I'm very excited to see where it takes me, honestly. I love connecting with people. I love learning with people. So I'm really looking forward to what this year has for us in that way. I'm also really excited for the in-person events. If you're in North Jersey, feel free to follow me at Chicklet Podcast at Latina Writing Comunidad. So follow me there, and I'm going to be posting weekly, monthly in-person events. I'm really excited for that, just to connect with people in person. We all go to work and then we scroll on TikTok after work until we fall asleep, and that's not sustainable. We have to do things that are good for our mental health, like going for walks or doing arts and crafts, listening to music. All of my events are also going to be alcohol free. I don't want to encourage binge drinking. I do enjoy the occasional drink here and there, but binge drinking is really negative for your physical health, your mental health, and so that's just not something that I want to promote. So they're all going to be alcohol free, which I really like. I'm very excited about that. And the rebrand of the podcast, that's going to be amazing too. All the changes and all the new and exciting things I'm looking forward to.
We'll definitely throw those handles you just mentioned in the show
Yeah.
notes. Tell us more about where anyone can connect with you and find you.
Well, hopefully by the time this comes out, I have a website. So maybe it's the website, but if not, it's just gonna be on Instagram. I don't really do TikTok and I'm very light on LinkedIn, but just Instagram at Latina Writing Comunidad, and I'll be there. I try to post like it'd be very clear about what the events are. I try to be very intentional about making the lineup pretty accessible and digestible. So yeah, if you want to connect virtually, I got you. If you want to connect in person, I got you. Podcast, I got you.
We'll definitely throw all that in the show notes. Vanessa,
Great.
it was such a pleasure to have you on the podcast. I'm so honored that I'm your first one. This is so amazing. You are a really bright light. And I have this feeling that you haven't even scratched the surface of all the impact you're about to make. Like
Yeah.
you are already having such a big impact, but it's only going to get bigger. And because you have such a growth mindset and you have this amenability to pivoting, You are going to be in flow a lot. And I can't wait to see what you do. Congratulations, so far, but there are going to be a lot more congratulations coming in the future.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I accept that compliment. I think that as women, we kind of be like, oh no, little old me. Like, no, thank you. I agree. I speak it into existence and I'm working hard to make what you just said true. So thank you. I accept.
Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Yes. Thank you.